Have you ever wondered what happens when cyberpunk goes too far? Stay with me for a few minutes and I'll enlighten you. Hey everyone, I'm Cotton Candy TA, and I'm going to be talking to everybody today about discovering Robopunk. This is a series I want to create to let people know about the genre that was created for the Chart Raiders world. And as the CEO of Chart Raiders, I am also joined by my COO, Alexandra.
Hey, hey.
And we're going to be discussing what Robopunk is. Robopunk is interesting because Robopunk, if you wanted to just put into quick words, what is Robopunk? You would say it's the final stages of humanity, the last stage before human extinction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is Robopunk and why is it that, and why this genre exists, because this is a brand new genre we're talking about. This is something that we coined specifically for Chart Raiders, but actually becomes this massive book that we're releasing, a multi-book novel, actually, not just a single book, but multiple books into a novel. And just talking about this whole entire world that we've built.
Yeah, totally. I think this represents your why when you were building the software that you made, Chart Raiders. It's your why when you were thinking of the story and how you see the world and how you see things unfolding. And I think that's really interesting. And that really came to be when we were developing the story. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. And you know, where that first starts is 4 years ago, I start writing this book about Chart Raiders, and I just start putting all my thoughts on paper. And, you know, I've always had kind of this special talent. Maybe it's why I was able to figure out the charts so much in day trading. I've always had this special talent to kind of foresight things. Maybe it's like pattern recognition at the highest level or something. I don't know. But my brain always kind of can see things before they happen. I'm really good at connecting dots. And that's, you know, if you know me, you've seen me do it all my life. So that's really where this starts from, is me creating this book about gluttony and greed and the effects of humanity and where we've gotten to. And you've seen it and you've also have experience with that.
Totally. I think as humans, and Cotton and I always talk about this, or I talk to him about it a lot, is the cyclical nature of humans and how, if you look back in history, how we kind of always repeat certain cycles. And I think that's an interesting, just merging our thoughts together on the topic, and then has been very interesting for me to kind of further develop my thoughts around this. And then when you came up with the term Robopunk and told me what it was and where your head was with it, I just thought, what a perfect piece that the world is missing right now, a perfect ideology, a perfect way of seeing things that is distinct from things like cyberpunk that already exist.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I first tried to describe this to you, I always said it's science factual. And you kind of laughed. You're like, what is science factual? I'm like, okay, well, think about it like this. It's not science fiction. It's science fact. It's actual real events that happen. And that's where the whole premise of Robopunk comes from, is my ability to forecast what the future could be if we continue down the path we are. And so I call it science fact because it almost lives as a parallel to our universe. It's the reality we live in, but the unspoken nature of it. And so Robopunk, it roots from cyberpunk, actually. And cyberpunk, for those of you who didn't know, like, we see cyberpunk as this cool, you know, technoblade, dark noir aesthetic that is very colorful and neon and futuristic, but it actually roots back to the 70s and 80s. And the first core piece, like if you were to go and read the original book, it says that cyberpunk, the definition of it is the streets have a use for everything. Mm-hmm. Which is just a reflection of consumerism. And in the 70s and 80s and, you know, post Reaganomics, what happens is corporations understand the blueprint to control humans through marketing, through the loss of freedom of speech. And so corporations and things like RoboCop, like the original RoboCop movie, was kind of one of the first cyberpunk movies where a corporation makes this big robot, the robot kills somebody in a boardroom, and it's kind of laughed at, like, oh my God, you've done so bad, but this is so great. And then, you know, corporations realize the power that they have over the world. So corporations and the freedom of speech was kind of the origins of cyberpunk. And losing freedom of speech was a huge one, because corporations, they cracked the blueprint to the streets have a use for everything. And this is where that saying comes from. Anyways, my interpretation of it is another teddy bear gets manufactured because there's another color available. Therefore, consumerism kicks in. We need a new teddy bear. We throw the old one out and it goes to the streets. And then somebody on the streets who's poorer because of consumerism, because consumerism drives poverty, Somebody who's on the streets picks up that teddy bear, stitches the eyes, spray paints it, and sells it as a multi-million-dollar graffiti piece, because the streets really do have a use for everything.
Yeah.
And the reflection, the thing that I got from Cyberpunk's original message from the 70s and 80s is that if the streets have a use for everything, it was the consumerism that caused it, and the consumerism killed freedom of speech. Like, people think we've been fighting freedom of speech in modern times. It's been gone for 30 years.
Yeah.
And Robopunk tackles the next stage of that, which is a building on Cyberpunk. We've lost freedom of speech. The next thing we lose is freedom of thought.
Mm-hmm.
So freedom of thought is, really the premise of Robopunk. And, again, I just go back to, it's the final stage of humanity, the last stage before human extinction. So it is the first real sequel to a cyberpunk world. And we've seen the effects of cyberpunk since the 70s and 80s. And, 40, 50 years later, here we are. And, cyberpunk, the streets are no more. We're in the next stage.
Well, yeah. And I think you just said something key there. We're in the next stage.
Yeah.
Cyberpunk was coined or defined, let's call it, I believe it's around the 70s. That's almost 50. That's like 50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that was their interpretation of the future. We're at a point in time where we need a new interpretation, or like the next phase of that interpretation, now that we are at that quote unquote future point from their perspective, to what the next 50 years looks like.
Well, it's like, where does humanity go once you lose freedom of speech? Like, we lost freedom of speech 30 years ago, and corporations did that with their blueprint.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because we lost it unofficially, if that makes sense. Like, if
we think we still have it. We think we're still fighting for it. We're not.
That's key to that.
Yeah, we're not. We're actually, right now, we think we're fighting freedom of speech. We're fighting freedom of thought.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's a scary thing, because freedom of thought is, we don't have freedom of thought. We don't have independent choices anymore. We have blue and red. Mm-hmm. We have man and woman.
Buckets.
We have patriarchy, matriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
We have everything as an option. Gone are the days where people actually use their own brains to come up with thoughts and ideas. We are given a list to pick from.
Yes, always a list of things to choose from, just like how exams went to multiple choice. It used to be you had to write an essay or anything, and now you're always picking from a subset of answers. And that's done because of consumerism, because they need to manufacture more degrees, get more students in and out of the door. How do they do that? Find a way to optimize it. Optimization and efficiency is a big driver of that. And now, what does that look like now as it progresses?
Yeah. And so if we lose that freedom of thought, which we are battling right now, and people don't even realize it, if we lose freedom of thought, humanity goes extinct. So we are in the final stages of humanity right now. And people think they're fighting for things they've already lost, when they need to shift their focus back to freedom of thought.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even get to pick anymore. We are just told it's either this or that. Even politically, I'm not going to get into political times, but even politically, we are told you either vote this way or you vote that way, or you follow this narrative. And if you don't follow this narrative, that means you follow that narrative. We don't have freedom of thought anymore. We are just given choices. Well,
and you can tell, if you really think of in your day and how we judge people, how many if-then statements we make. I always like to say that, because we're at a time where it's like, okay, if you prioritize X, then Y. Yeah. But we're not that simple. We're complex as human beings. That's not how it's supposed to work. You shouldn't always have to be lumped into one bucket or the other, but we operate this way.
Yeah. And so this is also a byproduct of economics. This is a byproduct of everything that you would say complacency. Our world has now been engineered to kill freedom of thought through complacency. They've made you have to work harder. The economic structure of the world is tougher, making it so that you don't have, like, a simple app like TikTok, for example. Well, you don't have time to keep up with the news and make that choice. So let us just give you a hit in 15 minutes. Complacency. We are constantly finding ways to make life easier, but it's also making us weaker.
Well, because we become dependent.
We're complacent, we're dependent, and we have this constant, endless reliance on everything around us, which is instinctually making us die slowly. Mm-hmm. We're becoming vessels. Well,
we evolve, right, as a species, and we're de-evolving in a sense.
Yeah. So this is everything that Robopunk is. To not go too deep into it, we've got a full series on deck to talk about this stuff. This is what Robopunk is, though. It is the following of what happens to a world that lost freedom of speech. Our world lost it a long time ago. So what's next? Because if we're going to sit here and we're just going to pretend like there's no next step after freedom of speech is lost, well, what do we lose next? Because that's not the end. that is the beginning of a very scary path. That was the first stage to the extinction of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Robopunk is. That's what it represents. That's what it looks like. And it's all about losing our freedom.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dive into all the little intricacies of it.
Yeah, me too.